Let's make a start. And I'd like to welcome you all to this first Zoom meeting of the Stratford Society. This is a new format that we've adopted because of lockdown. And it's really not feasible to have physical meetings anymore. We can only have them in this format. And so for this first meeting using Zoom, we're going back to the topic that we should have had in March, which was had to be postponed because of lockdown. And I'm delighted to welcome two people who are very proficient cyclists and who are great friends of the Stratford Society. That's Dr. Bob Bearman and Jenny Fradgley. So I'm going to ask each of you to speak for about 15 minutes, talking about your experiences in cycling in Stratford and what's needed in terms of better facilities and better resources in the town. And then we'll throw it open to general discussion, question and answer. Could I ask everyone who's not speaking to put yourselves on mute while so that we don't interrupt the speaker. So first of all, I'm going to hand over to Bob. And Bob has been associated with the Society for many years, was chairman in 1990, I think, or thereabouts, and also leading historian in Warwickshire. So Bob, over to you.
Well, thank you very much. And I think I'd like to just begin by saying a bit about sort of why I cycle and how long I've been cycling, because it's all to do with trying to persuade people to adopt a lifestyle which does have many advantages. I mean, I've been cycling all my life, really, at least from the age of 10, and still at the age of 78, I still managed to clock up 50 miles a week. And I just checked today, I've done 14,172 miles just in the last 5 years, and not in any sporting way. I'm 12 for that anyway, but simply as a means of getting around. And I say this not to boast, but to make the point that I'm not some kind of irritating recent convert to the environmental virtues of cycling, just someone who is who's always and continues to find it rewarding. And to make the point, I suppose, that if I can do it now at my age, a lot of younger people could also do it a bit more easily. And I use the word rewarding advisedly, better than always enjoyable, as it does include such things as getting sunstroke in hot countries, or getting sort of wet and cold virtually everywhere else, exhausted from time to time to the point of tears, or at least on the part of my partner, and cycling around in the dark on the central Spanish plains trying to find somewhere to stay. But all this, at least in my mind, and usually in retrospect, is rewarding. The feeling that despite everything, you've got somewhere under your own steam, and that the journey itself is an adventure, the opposite of sitting in a metal box just dying to get to your destination. And obviously it's good for your pocket, it's good for your mental outlook, at least whatever you think about all the environmental destruction going on all around you, at least in that moment you're not contributing to it. But I was pleased to find in the late 1980s, or rather by the 1970s, that the humble bicycle was beginning to be taken more seriously by planners because of its environmental benefits. So much so that way back in 1981, that's 36 years ago, I actually managed to produce a report about the that sort of 36 years ago, and I suppose, to help compile a report on the various ways that cycling could be made easier in the town. It reduces air pollution, it reduces dependence on fossil fuels, it reduces congestion, and it reclaims the streets for pedestrians and cyclists. And anyone thinking of our calls have gone unanswered, despite the best intentions and so on, they can't be old enough to remember that in 1981, there wasn't any cycle provision at all in the town. Instead, there was absolutely none. But progress may have been slow, but since then we have at least had the Greenway, a cycleway along the tramway, at least as far as Waitrose, a cycle path linking the Greenway through to the college and high school and out of town along the canal towpath, all part of Sustrans Route 5. We have proper cycle racks in the town centre. We have several on-road advanced stop cycle lines, and cycle lanes of sort of varying quality, I suppose, in Evesham Road, Ulster Road, Birmingham Road and Banbury Road. And then there's the Sustrans Route 41, some of you may have used, into town from the Bridgetown estate, via a controlled crossing on the Shipston Road and then through the Dry Arch into the recreation ground. And most recently, along Waterside, there is contraflow cycling allowed, and cycling, I think, is permitted at all times in Henley Street, although sometimes you get a dirty look. But it has been something of a struggle to get that far, despite the fact that there has been general support at all levels of local government. I mean, there is the government itself, which is now urging local authorities to do something to make provision better. The County Council, the District Council, the Town Council have all endorsed cycling in principle, and it's all been duly incorporated into local plans, including the most recent, the Stratford Neighbourhood Plan. But actually getting things done has been far more difficult, due mainly to an alleged lack of money. It's partly true, but I also think, and I'm sure any councillors watching will excuse me now, it's really from a lack of courage on the part of councillors and senior officers. I mean, if policymakers are really determined to do something, there's always a pot of money somewhere, as we recently found out. Now, attempts to bring pressure have been made, but I would be the first to admit it's been spasmodic. I mean, it can be depressing due to snail's pace at which things get done through local authority and local committees and so on. And the Cycle Forum, which I'm convening at the moment, has had at least 3 lives. But most recently, a few years ago, it was resurrected for the 3rd time to make the case that especially now there was a real need to do something. And it does have to be good provision, of course, based on a master plan that the authorities are determined and committed to implement. Not something which is piecemeal, tacked on to various development plans in the hope that one day it will all be joined up. And if you want to make the town centre a better place to be, then freeing it from the impact of motorised traffic in favour of what's called active travel, that is walking and cycling, then it has to be properly provided for. And as far as cycling is concerned, all routes have to be continuous, safe and clearly marked if more people are going to see this as a real travel option. I mean, if you take the Birmingham Road as an example, I mean, way back in 1981, I think it was, we pointed out that the general pavement widths there would be ideal for the creation of a high standard off-road cycleway. Well, in 2008, we did eventually get one, but with all due respect, it could have been better. mean, firstly, it wasn't segregated, leading to misunderstandings with pedestrians. Secondly, it's created so many obstacles to crossing side roads that many experienced cyclists actually just prefer to stick on the main carriageway. But I mean, that's not the point, of course. What we should be trying to do is to provide an alternative for those who until now have been hesitant to try cycling as an option. Now, crucially, improvements have been agreed as part of a wider scheme concerning Birmingham Road. And believe it or not, something is about to happen. But the latest plans I've seen, in fact last week, though certainly an improvement on what's there, from a cyclist point of view, it still does have shortcomings. If the idea is to convince people that for short urban trips, a bike is a real option. And we are really going to have to do something that really helps cyclists. Then there's always the Bridgefoot, Cropton Bridge and Bridgetown problem. And we've submitted a scheme to take cyclists from the bottom of Bridge Street through Bridgefoot and then over the Avon to Bridgetown. This has been accepted as desirable in principle. Indeed, in fact, the Warwickshire County Council agrees that this is one of the corridors that just has to be improved. And it won't be cheap, as it will require a shared foot and cycle bridge slightly upstream from Clopton Bridge. However, at the last count, but I could be wrong, Jenny may correct me, the County Council has not even secured funding for a feasibility study. Now, things have certainly picked up, as someone was saying before the meeting, as a result of concern over climate crisis. More cycling will help cut the use of fossil fuels and carbon emissions. And there's already been a big increase in cycle commuting in big towns. But in Stratford, at least, cries of no money has still been used to hold up progress. But then along came coronavirus. I mean, obviously that's not a great time in many respects, but for cyclists, the government announced that it will support more cycling provision, even says there should be more pop-up facilities, although what was attempted in Stratford wasn't universally popular. So how are things going to improve? I mean, personally, I won't cycle any more or any less, or whatever extra provisions made, of course, but others might if it was made to look safer and for short urban journeys, easily within their abilities and more convenient than being held up in traffic jams or wondering where to park your car. Streets would be reclaimed for those who just don't want to use them as part of a through route, and we would collectively reduce pollution and congestion and help save the planet. And all this might happen, but hard decisions about spending money are made by politicians. They may personally want to do something that, apart from the fact they want to be re-elected, they do need to know that there's a demand, and they need to know that money is being well spent. From the very start, even in lockdown 1, everyone has been allowed to get out and exercise, and so huge numbers seem to have taken cycling up or taken it up again. So hopefully all those who are suddenly rediscovering the delights of cycling, they will continue to do so. It's just good to cycle. Above all, it's not perhaps as dangerous as they thought it was. It's a fine way of commuting. There's no need to dress up if you don't want to in special clothes or even wear a helmet. It's great to have the town less dominated by cars, and far from being a dangerous thing to do, it is actually good for you. So they've got to keep doing it, and they need to convince councillors that there's a need, and to take advantage of the government's sudden initiative and get hold of some of that money that's recently been announced. Perhaps Jenny will be able to reassure us that that is what's happening. And we have to take advantage not only of current policy noises that cycling is a good thing. We must make sure that those who have come back to cycling will stay on two wheels in the long term. And one way of doing this is to make sure that better and better provision is being made for them. I mean, the benefits of cycling have now moved from mere theory to those who have actually taken it up. So let's have an end to all those negative stories fueled by the anti-cycling press. Even amongst environmental groups, I've heard complaints, oh, I'm nearly killed by a cyclist. Cyclists don't stop at traffic lights, they ride on pavements, don't have lights and so on. And of course, these things do happen. But alleged antisocial behaviour occurs in all walks of life. It's not about how individual cyclists, drivers, horse riders or motorists behave. It's whether their mode of travel creates more problems than it solves. And as I said at the start, personally, I just ride a bike because I find it emancipating, and I'll continue to do so while I can. If enough others come on board, then something will happen. So I think I'll stop there, and perhaps Jenny can sort of reassure us that things in local authorities are happening.
Okay, happy to carry on, Lindsay?
Yes, thanks very much,
Yeah.
Jenny. Yes, I just by way of introduction, I should point out that you have the rare privilege of being a councillor at 3 levels. So you're active in the town council and the district council and the county council. And therefore, you're in a wonderful position to understand how best to coordinate all the different initiatives at all those levels for the benefit of the town. So.
Okay. Thank you. Just a little bit of an intro. My first memories of cycling, I was sitting on a blue and pink candy striped cushion tied to the crossbar of my father's drop handlebar bike, and I sat side saddle and held onto the handlebars. I think I must have been round about 3 at the time, and he cycled me to the swimming baths and to Sutton Park where we lived to play football and climb trees. So my very, very first sort of cycling experience was when I was very, very young. I also remember the cushions slipping around sometimes and having to hold on for dear life. I often cycled the 3 miles to my school, and when bored, my mother would also give me and my brother a packed lunch and tell us to cycle to Lichfield. I'm never sure why she always said cycle to Lichfield, but we did visit it on several occasions as when we were sort of young teenagers. Since moving on, my greatest joy when I was a child was my second-hand black bicycle, which I polished and shone and kept in a way that I've never kept any bicycle since. Since moving to Stratford about 40 years ago, I've been a committed cyclist, a committed commuter cyclist, taking my daughter around in a proper child seat, cycling to work at Stratford High as it was then. If I ever had to go by car, I'd have to leave the house a good 30 minutes before to get to school on time. And if I cycled, it took me 15 minutes max. So cycling has real advantages. The highlight of my cycling career is really the cycling for Parkinson's in my mayoral year. Couldn't have done it without the help of a local cycle aficionado, Rob Gullen, and my daughter. But we took a Johnson's coach full of cyclists and Bob, I believe, to and an Oldham's van full of the bikes to the then building site, 2012 Olympics in Stratford, London. And we cycled back along the Lee Valley to Stratford, stopping overnight at Hemel Hempstead. And in glorious sunshine, and the second day was in pouring, howling rain. And there had been yellow warning signs on the television that night when we were in Hemel Hempstead, and people were wondering whether they were actually going to manage it the day afterwards. But it was great, and we cycled, and we raised about £30,000 for Parkinson's. So that's a real highlight in my cycling career. Living in a smallish smallish town, cycling for me is an absolute no-brainer. Why take a car and take twice the time, add CO2 and other noxious particles to the atmosphere, and then have to pay for the privilege of parking in my own town? Now, I'm lucky still to be able to cycle, and I hope to continue to do so for pleasure, work, shopping and leisure for some time to come. However, road conditions have gradually changed so much with congestion, and now climate change taking centre stage, which it should have been occupying for decades, has made cycling more problematic, especially for the young and adults who may have given up cycling and actually want to come back to cut out short car journeys and actually take to a bicycle. But it's people I talk to, residents I talk to about this, say they're frightened to do it. They're scared of the traffic. They actually find it a very, very uncomfortable place to be. Some people actually circumvent that by cycling on the pavement. I've never approved of cycling on pavements unless there's nobody on the pavement. But I saw a young man the other day cycle down Bridge Street on his bicycle, ringing his bell, demanding that people on the pavement got out of his way. I mean, this is completely unacceptable. We've got to make cycling safe for cyclists, but safe for pedestrians. The two actually go together if we're going to make this work. With COVID-19 and the consequent lockdowns we've been enduring, cycling has become a really hot topic, and the government is throwing money at it, 22 billion to enable safer cycling. This is excellent news, but this chunk of money is really targeted at the cities where it serves to get people to take those short journeys by bicycle rather than actually taking their car for short journeys. Although that was turned around during COVID, as we all know, when the government actually told us to get into our cars rather than go on public transport. So there's some real mixed messages going on, but people for short distances, that money is intended in London, Birmingham, Liverpool, Manchester, to try and make those short journeys happen quickly. But we have actually managed to get some of that money, which I'll actually tell you about now, because as a county councillor, I'm in a position to try and create better conditions for cyclists, to promote better, safer cycling. And I do that by sitting on Bob Cycle Forum to hear what grassroots is saying, talking to residents to hear grassroots. But I also sit on the County Council Cycling Monitoring Group and the cross-party climate change emergency group, both of which have interests in promoting cycling in the town, in the county and in the town. As a county councillor, I've always been a keen advocate of improving cycling provisions and seeking to place planning for cycling routes at the heart of planning locally. Now that's shared between the district and the county, but the county has major responsibilities for ensuring that cycling is on the agenda. It's quite difficult. I remember having a conversation with the head of service for highways and saying every single highway project that comes forward, the major ones for the county, should have cycling provision built into it. There should be cycleways, money for cycleways up front when the plans are put into place. And that's true. Most of the highways provisions do have cycleways indicated. But as soon as push comes to shove and money comes to play, then it's a cycleway that is dropped first from those projects. And we need to make sure that we can keep as many of those in place as possible. With that happened on South West Relief Road. There were cycleways intended to be on the deck, but reasons came forward as to why that couldn't happen. And the cycleway now will be affected along the Greenway. But it's a shame that it was taken off the deck, because that would have been the quickest, simplest way for a cyclist to have got around. But we have actually made some improvements. Bob mentioned the Evesham Road, the Evesham Road. Now the Evesham Road, when it came up for resurfacing, putting in the extension of the cycle track to a statutory cycle track was going to has taken place alongside the resurfacing. Now that's cut down on the expenditure, but it's also provided safe routes along the Evesham Road, and the route that I prefer to use, which is on the road, because I don't want to find that I have to keep stopping at side roads to allow cars to have authority over the shared space. So I'm a great believer in actually dedicated cycle tracks which have the right to go over side roads or on the road itself. On the Banbury Road, when that was resurfaced some time ago, the advisory cycle track, I was asked, did I want to maintain the advisory cycle track? And I said, yes. I know a lot of cyclists say they don't like it. It's dangerous, it's narrow. However, I live on the Banbury Road and I use it all the time. And it does provide space for the cyclist to filter through in the early morning traffic. And when there's a traffic jam there, you do have a space to actually come through. So although it's not ideal, I thought it was a better thing to keep than actually get rid of it. I have had some information from the county, which I'd just like to tell you about. As Bob said, the Birmingham Road, the scheme to extend and upgrade the cycle provision on the Birmingham Road, the overall cost of the whole scheme for the Birmingham Road is £6.5 million. And that's being provided by the Department for Transport Pinch Point Fund at 2.4 million, and the remainder is being put in from the County Capital Fund. I think it's important to realise that all the projects that we actually look to enact, they have to find funding, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And you can see there 2 pots of money coming in to make that happen. The Ulster Road scheme to upgrade the existing cycle facilities is a 2-kilometre upgrade of the cycle track there. The scheme is estimated to cost £630,000, with £150,000 coming from the County Casualty Reduction Capital Funding Scheme. Because there have been so many accidents recorded on that road, it qualified to take money from that pot. And the rest is coming from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, Getting Building Fund. So these funds which I'm talking about are the funds that the government is beginning to feed into the system that the county can actually access for the projects that we actually are looking at around the town. Bishopton Lane development provides S106 money, and that's going to be used to improve the access from the Bishopton Road through to the town centre. And there will also be money towards improving the canal towpath between Bishopton Lane and Timothy's Bridge Road. So there are projects which are beginning to find funding from development and from the government. And they'll also be providing from that money towards upgrading of the Greenway. As I've just said, that will be the cycleway for the South West Relief Road. Right, just read that. Sorry, just read that one through because I just got that yesterday, ready for this meeting. I must say that London is leading the way in adapting existing roads to better share of scarce space. My son and family live in Greenwich, and on the main road there, if you know it, Trafalgar Road, parking has been mostly removed and sufficient space coned off with those wobbly rubber cones to designate safe cycle space. Some side roads have been designated cycle routes, so cycling with children is a real alternative to taking the car for the school run. But there's a considerable kickback in some areas. But just a thought, we've always favoured cars in all our planning considerations, cars above pedestrians, cars above cyclists. And why? Surely it's time that we actually think, if I can walk, not all of us can. If I can cycle, let's cycle and walk, and let's pressurise the government to make sure the funds are there to make those activities safe. The county develops cycle maps for the county. All towns have got cycle maps, and cycle maps for each town. But in many ways, what they're actually doing now is very important. They are, at the moment, they're expecting shortly to ask stakeholders like us here and the community input into a proposed update of network plans, a part of the work to prepare a local cycling and walking infrastructure plan. Now, whether that infrastructure plan is going to be part of the local transport plan, which is just about to come out for consultation, or whether it's going to be a separate document, I'm not clear at the moment, and I'll actually keep you up to date on that. But when that document comes out for consultation, that's a vehicle for us all to be putting in our ideas about how we can actually improve cycling in our town. We have two really interesting community-generated cycleways coming forward at the moment. One coming up from to Stratford from Shipston, and the other coming down to Stratford from Ulster. The Ulster cycleway is well advanced. Apparently all the parishes along the way are signed up to it, including Stratford Town Council. And it's now actually looking, and it's done a considerable amount of feasibility work supported by Sustrans. And I've just actually introduced the promoters of that to the county so they can actually start to talk. And I hope that the line for that line will actually find its way into the infrastructure plan I've just talked about. The South Warwickshire, where we live, is the most affected by the economic downturn due to COVID-19 in the region, possibly in the wider region, because we're so dependent on tourism. And I think projects like these community projects coming forward are going to help diversify our economic provision in actually supporting other tourist attractions in the town. And it would also take people out from the town to the villages in safety. Finally, I'd just like to say I have a real interest in developing safer routes to school, and I sit on that body at the county. We're just actually recommending that we put some money into an extra member of staff who can go and liaise with schools to talk about the safety of schools in general, but in particular to look at ways in which green plans can be promoted with schools, with parent associations, and with students. Once more, just looking at my family experience, my grandsons in London are what's called a walking school. They made a survey of their catchment area and they produced a huge map which they hang outside the school, demonstrating where the cycle to school is between 5 and 10 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes, 25 to 30 minutes. So parents have a clear idea how long it's going to take them to get to school. Each class has a travel monitor who is responsible to listen to the problems that their fellow pupils have and keep a log to help improve the walking experience. I've been trying to promote this for some time in our schools, but it does have huge difficulties. When you talk to parents who are really busy, they say, I've got to drive to school, drop my child off and get off to work. But we've got to start a nudge to make it as appetizing as possible for children to walk and cycle to school. I must say recently, I have seen so many more pupils walking and cycling past my house in the morning on the Banbury Road to access presumably the Kes and Stratford School. So I must say in conclusion that I support an increase in walking, cycling and scootering, but cyclists must play their part and use the roads and shared space, not the pavements. I told you about the young man in Bridge Street. So I think we've all got our place to play, and I hope that the safer routes to school start young people cycling to school safely, and that I, as a county councillor and as a district councillor and as a town councillor, can promote what we want in the town to make cycling safer. Thank you.